The wind howled through the empty plains, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and the whisper of something unseen. A single van sat parked near the edge of a wooded valley, its headlights cutting weakly through the thickening fog. Inside, Mira Kane adjusted her scarf and took a slow breath, steadying her hands against the cold steering wheel. She had been traveling alone for the past 2 years, moving from one desolate place to another, chasing the kind of freedom she had long been denied. But tonight was different. The town of Black Hollow lay just a few miles down the road, a place whispered about in online forums, known for its unsettling history of disappearances. No major news outlet had ever covered it. No investigations had ever been launched. The town existed in a kind of eerie silence, its secrets buried beneath a surface of forced normalcy. Mira had come here not by accident, but by purpose. Because beneath the polite smiles and quiet streets, she knew something sinister lurked, and she was here to expose it. Mira had spent the past year documenting the darker sides of forgotten towns, places where the law turned a blind eye, where corruption festered in the shadows. She wasn't just a traveler. She was a seeker of truth, a woman hardened by betrayal and loss. After her divorce, she had shed the expectations society had placed upon her, embracing the solitude of the open road. Black Hollow, though, had tested even her resolve. Her research had led her to a series of cryptic messages in obscure forums. People spoke of a judge who ruled the town with an iron fist, Judge Malcolm Greaves. His word was final, his reach endless. The stories were vague, wrapped in warnings and half-truths, but one thing was clear. Those who crossed him vanished without a trace. Myra's plan had been simple: arrive quietly, document the town, and leave. But things took a turn the moment she set foot in Black Hollow's only diner. The place was almost unervingly pristine: red leather booths, polished floors, a scent of fresh coffee hanging in the air. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with weary eyes, had barely looked at Mira when taking her order. The other customers, mostly older men, had watched her in silence, their gazes heavy with something between suspicion and warning. Then, the sheriff walked in. Sheriff Nolan Pike was a broad-shouldered man with graying hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He had greeted the room with an air of ownership before zeroing in on Mira. "You're not from around here," he said, sliding into the booth across from her uninvited. Mira met his gaze without flinching. "Just passing through." The sheriff studied her for a moment before nodding toward her camera bag. "Travel blogger?" "Something like that." His fingers drummed lightly against the table. "Black Hollow isn't much of a tourist spot. Most folks don't stay long." Mira smiled. "Maybe I'll be the exception." The sheriff chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. "We'll see about that." As he left, the waitress leaned in, speaking so softly that Mira barely caught the words. "Be careful. Not everyone who comes here gets to leave." That night, Mira parked her van on the outskirts of town, her mind replaying the day's events. Something was wrong here, but she needed proof. She had noticed a large, worn-down building at the end of the main street. A courthouse, if the crumbling sign was to be believed. If Judge Greaves held as much power as the rumors suggested, then that place would hold answers. With only her camera and a small flashlight, she made her way through the darkness, sticking to the shadows. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and something metallic, something that made her stomach twist. The courthouse doors were locked, but a side window had been left slightly open, as if inviting her in. Inside, the building was eerily silent. Dust covered every surface, but the floor showed signs of recent movement. Scuff marks, footprints leading toward the main chamber. Mira followed them, heart pounding. The doors creaked as she pushed them open, revealing a courtroom bathed in cold moonlight. And that's when she saw it. A chair, placed in the center of the room. Heavy leather straps dangled from its arms and legs, dark stains soaked into the wood. This wasn't a courtroom. It was a place of judgment, but not the legal kind. A shuffling noise came from the shadows. Mira barely had time to turn before a voice echoed through the chamber. "You should have left when you had the chance." The sheriff. He stepped forward, followed by 2 other men, both older, both watching her with unreadable expressions. Then, from the far end of the room, another figure emerged. Judge Malcolm Greaves. He was tall, gaunt, his presence alone suffocating. His suit was immaculate, his face devoid of emotion. You think you can just waltz into my town and poke around? His voice was steady, measured. Do you know how many before you have tried? Mira tightened her grip on her camera. And what happened to them? The judge smiled, but it was void of any humanity. They were judged accordingly. The men moved toward her, but Mira was faster. She bolted toward the exit, heart pounding, mind racing. She had always been prepared for danger, but this was something far worse than she had imagined. She reached the window she had come through, scrambling out just as a hand nearly caught her ankle. She hit the ground running. Back in her van, she didn't hesitate. She uploaded the footage immediately, sending it to multiple cloud backups, along with a message to every independent journalist she knew. If she went missing, the world would know why. But she wasn't done yet. She wasn't just going to run. She had exposed towns like this before. She knew how they operated. People were too afraid to speak, too afraid to act. But she wasn't. The next morning, she drove straight into town, stepping out of her van with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. People watched from behind curtains, from shop windows. They knew. She walked to the center of town and pulled out her phone. The video she had uploaded had already started gaining traction. Comments poured in, people demanding answers, demanding investigations. The more eyes on Black Hollow, the less control its leaders had. Then, the sheriff appeared. Behind him, the judge. Their expressions were carefully blank, but she could see the flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. You think a video is going to change anything? The judge asked. Mira stepped closer, meeting his gaze head-on. It already has. A buzzing sound came from the sheriff's radio. He hesitated before answering. As he did, his face paled. Mira already knew what was happening. The world was watching now. And in the face of exposure, even the most powerful men crumbled. By the time the authorities arrived, Judge Greaves and his men had disappeared. The town was silent, its people cautious but no longer afraid. The spell had been broken. As Mira drove away, she knew this wouldn't be her last fight. There would always be another town, another darkness lurking beneath the surface. But she wasn't afraid. She had become something more than a nomad. She was a force, a reckoning, and she would never stop.